Act 537, Finley Elrama Road Storage Extensions Project. The reason this is a discussion item is, as you guys know, that there, as far as Finley, as far as Peter Street Sanitary is concerned, they're ready to advertise for public comment on the line extension. In my opinion, as far as, we were ready to go on the initial, what we agreed to in Judge Lucas's courtroom. But this extension to that extension, we have some questions. Still working out the details with, if they're gonna collect that service for us. Where would we come up with the money? How would we recoup the money? Can we get a grant for the money? Can we, I'm not opposed to the extension, but it's another $250,000. And so they are open to a discussion about debt service collection, as Weeza does for us. But I think until we hammer that out, how we're gonna afford to make this project even bigger with no debt service is a concern for saying, let's advertise it today for public review.
TJ, when we discussed at our meeting with DEP yesterday, when it came time to this project about grinder pumps, what was the comment made?
They were glad to see we weren't doing grinder pumps.
They were glad to see for our entire community that we weren't doing grinder pumps. Grinder pumps
Is that
not a
right?
good idea in their opinion. Grinder pump is very expensive for the user and break down. I think they said they just break down all the time.
And they said it's less expensive for the township, but it's a lot more expensive for the customer, which is true.
But the township is the people within the township. So it's like, they also were a bit shocked that that came before Mingo. You know, they were a little bit perplexed that that came before Mingo, and they said they kept asking for different things for Mingo, different permits, and they said, well, they were gonna give them with the HOP permits, and they're like, that has nothing to do with what we're asking you for. And they said in the HOP permits, and they ended up being for Finley Elrama Road anyway, not for Mingo Circle, which they were insisting on, give us your permit applications, give us your permit application. They said, oh yeah, we're gonna give it to you with, they said, the quote was, I think, that it felt like the runaround. They felt like we were not gonna be compliant to our consent order.
I do know at the meeting several times they mentioned, why is it Mingo Circle hasn't moved forward, and that project was put out in 2018, while Finley Elrama Road came out in 2021, and we're much further along on it.
Well, you know, one thing, some of the people told me that, Harshman did surveys up there and how they were gonna run the lines and everything, all that engineering that they did, and where would that stuff be? If they did, I mean, they claim they did that.
This is the reason that they couldn't understand why Finley Elrama Road had got pushed forward when we were under a consent order since 2018 on Mingo Circle, because they said this township did a survey, and we said we did a survey, and that we had 40% failure up there on Mingo Circle. 40%. We told that, the township told the DEP we got 40% of our residents on Mingo Circle were failing.
Were defective.
40%.
And
And
what
then,
I'm saying is, like, they said that, I know, I talked to some of the people, they surveyed through their property, said the lines are going through the property and everything. That the Harshman already did that, that's
they're
what I'm
saying they
saying.
don't understand why Union Township would give them information saying 40% failure on Mingo Circle, and then just skip over it to do Finley Elrama Road.
Right. I don't know.
And it was pointed out, Steve,
Particularly
there's
since they were already under
106,
consent order.
106 properties
Mhm.
up in Mingo Circle.
Right,
There was only originally 19 properties on Finley Elrama
Right.
Road. So how is it that Finley Elrama Road got priority?
right, I don't know.
But
I'm
they,
just telling you, I know that up at Mingo, they surveyed on people's properties, and they said the lines are going down through here, and that, I said, I
and they
really-
also, I will have to say this, on TJ's benefit. One thing I heard them say was, TJ, we're glad to see Bankston's on board down there. they did say it to him, they said it's good
They
to
did.
see Bankston on board down there. They did not have a lot of good to say with their personal dealings with our old engineer and what it was like to work with them. And apparently Bankston, which is one of the reasons we chose Bankston, was
Right.
because of their sewage
Right.
history, because sewage is very important to us. So it was their knowledge of sewers, the sewage that we picked up for. But apparently they're known at the DEP. The DEP was like glad to see Bankston on board in Union Town, so maybe something will get done.
Well, that's a good move.
That's a
we
good,
take,
yeah, I
right?
mean, they were,
It was a nice compliment to receive.
it was, might have been the only thing going, I felt like I was in the principal's office. I felt like it was a whole group of attorneys and people talking about millions of dollars worth of fines because we've been non-compliant since the month they all left.
TJ, one question for you on 537.
Yeah.
Do we have to approve it before DEP reviews it, or is DEP already?
So our path forward, and I agree with what Michelle said, but there's certainly questions that need to be answered from the township's end of things. But to answer your question, Chuck, we would advertise, we'd pass a motion to advertise the 537 plan for a 30-day public comment period. Once the 30-day public comment period has concluded, you incorporate any public comments and make any changes that need to be made to the plan, and then it would be put on the floor to be adopted by a resolution by the township prior to being submitted to PADEP for their ultimate approval as well. So we'll need a resolution.
It's township submission, not Peters Creek.
No, yeah.
Yes.
So I think, Michelle, what we're gonna need to do is possibly advertise that and negotiate with Peters Creek Sanitary Authority to get these last questions answered
For.
during the 30-day commentary period. Because we wanna get this project moving as fast as we can to try and solve issues.
So,
Provided we have some funding.
well, that's the thing, is my conversations with Bankston Engineering, when I asked whether or not we're ready to advertise this, or put it out for public comment. I was under the impression, and I might have misheard it, that no, we're not ready for that.
So, our office received the 537 plan, we reviewed it. We generated a comment letter for the board for a meeting on the 19th. One of my main concerns with the 537 plan at this point is it's very much oriented to the sanitary authority. The tap-in fee and the user rates, they do not consider any capital costs that Union Township would incur as part of the project. Personally, I think would be somewhat irresponsible to, not have this financial component figured out before we advertise for public comment.
There's more than just the financial, there's an issue with where the location of the new lift station will be, Mr. Burnsworth. And basically what we'd be asking Bankston Engineer is to prepare a subdivision for them to review for the planning commission, for them to make recommendations on, in which then the township would be taking this property to give to Peters Creek Sanitary, and whether or not it wouldn't be good to ask Peters Creek Sanitary to do that subdivision and that, because it puts him in a position that he shouldn't be in.
The way the MOU is set up, Union Township's responsible for property acquisition. If it got to a point where we were subdividing the Burnworth piece of property and creating a piece of property to accommodate a lift station, that puts our office in a precarious position as the preparer of a subdivision plan that would then come before Union Township's Planning Commission and supervisors. That's a conflict of interest. I would have to step aside in that situation, and somebody else would have to
Now,
complete a review.
In talking.
That's a little ways down the
talking
road.
to Mr. Levy, and this is just chairman to chairman without the boards, he said, why not have your board ask us to acquire that property? And I said, well, in the memorandum of understanding. And he said, well, the memorandum of understanding was on the initial project.
Right.
This is in addition to. This is all negotiable. the initial memorandum of understanding for the 19 homes and the thing, he said, yeah, you made a memorandum of understanding to acquire the properties in the initial plan. This is above and beyond, not addressed in the memorandum of understanding, and whether or not Peters Creek Sanitary would be willing to acquire the Burnsworth property is something he'd have to bring before his board, but it is not, none of this is addressed in that memorandum of understanding, so it still has to be addressed.
So why would, and I did a major project in another Canton Township with the Mill Ridge project. We dealt with Ouija, we dealt with Chartiers Township. And in that situation there, you know, again, we had, Ouija, East Washington Authority charges a tap fee or capacity fee, and we charge a tap fee to get back some of our costs. Is there a reason why PCSA would be against us charging a fee for that? I mean, capacity fee, tax, whatever you're gonna call it.
Okay, I don't think PCSA is against the township recouping
We
money,
just have to
okay?
figure out how we're gonna do
Gotta
it.
figure out how you're gonna do it. Now, PCSA, as far as its billings, tap-ins and all that, we said it's not gonna be any different than any other customer.
So we could possibly create a sewer district for this area, correct?
It's an option to look at, yes.
I think we should look at that
I
option.
think we have to make them an offer, like, we have to
Well-
come up with something to bring to their board to see if their board's willing to do it. I think they're not gonna come up with something if we, you know, we have to actually say specifically what we're asking them to do. We have to come up with something and say, will you guys vote to do this? But
I think, again, I think township should consider a sewer district, from my perspective, because you have Overlook, you have Weeza, and what other districts you have, but make a separate sewer district, figure out what the cost is going to be. I mean, do we have an idea what the cost may be here yet?
For our share.
Yeah. Any rough estimate?
it was,
So we should figure out what the cost is gonna be in terms of,
So this is,
So- okay.
this is where I'm torn, as much as I'd like to give everybody sewer. This would be the very first time taxpayer money would be sent for a storage extension with no debt service for the users. The people in Elrama Village paying for 30 years debt service. People in Overlook are paying 30 years of debt service. Should they also spend their tax money to send it out in the road? I want them to have storage. So like, everybody gets debt service. There has to be some sort of debt service collected from these people. Other than that, the people that are already paying debt service put their tax dollars for someone that doesn't have debts. It just seems unfair to me, and you guys might
Well,
look at it differently.
Peters Creek, I think is still paying on
We're
debt
still
service
paying-
on
we're
their
still
bills,
paying.
right?
But at least it's
Yeah,
spread
I'm sure.
throughout their customers. If everybody
Right.
sends their sewage declared and everybody pays debt service,
Right.
but we're asking people on Patterson Road and Mingo Circle to pay debt service when they pray they get sewage. You
well,
know, we're gonna take money from the taxpayers that don't have storage and ask them to take their tax money and put it here for someone else to get
Well,
it.
that's
At least it's spread evenly at Peters Creek.
that's the reason why you create the sewer district. And then basically what you do is you figure out, have a rough estimate of cost, then you'd have to pass a resolution saying for what the cost would be, what the tap fee, capacity, whatever you wanna call it, okay? Then that would be, alright, let's go back. You do a sewer project, a water project, you have different components. You have, your user rates composed of O&M and debt service, okay? And debt service, and basically, when you're financing a project, you don't have grants, you go for loans, and then that's where you have your debt service. But your capacity fee, your tap fee, is your local contribution to initially offset some of that cost. That's what I'm saying, we should create a sewer district, figure out what, you know, rough estimate what the cost is going to be. Then we should, you know, once you do that, then TJ should figure out how to finance it, that basically how much grant money you can get grant money possibly, but figure out what the debt service would be, then he would have to suggest a resolution to set forth what the capacity fee or tap fees would be, because you need engineering, calculations to figure that out, am I correct, TJ?
Yeah, you need to justify it somehow.
Yeah,
Correct.
but don't, Peters Creek already got the tap-in fee
Well,
set.
but but like when I did Canton Township, Ouija, Washington,
Right.
they have their tap fee, and then we charge a separate fee.
Right.
We
all right,
did it
yeah,
Overlook.
all right,
They paid South Park a tap-in fee, they paid Union Township a tap-in fee.
right.
But, like I said, I'm just hesitant to have people that are already paying debt service, and it does, it makes your property more valuable. It also, how relieving it is not to maintain a septic tank, not
Or a
to,
grinder pump.
I mean, that costs money too. So
So
this
you-
isn't gonna be more than that.
So do you want TJ's, or banks or whoever, to put some type of scope of what, how much, how much time do you think it would take you to do something like that?
We have people in my office that are more familiar with it than I am, so, I don't think it's a ton of effort to at least have a preliminary type of
Plan.
analysis maybe
Right.
put together, yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, paying for Veterans Park, talking about Sneed Bridge, doing MS4, I don't think this township can afford to extend that project without debt service. I just don't believe it can. There's just too many things that, how are we ever gonna storage Mingo if we're just, $750,000 for that project, and we're talking about another $300,000,
Yeah, to do the project, I think it's important to continue to collaborate with the sanitary authority, but, I think that's, what we're talking about now is a detail that needs to be figured out and then included in the 537 plan before we can advertise it to the public, in my opinion.
So, can you have it done in a couple weeks?
Sure.
Peters Creek has a meeting last Monday of the month, I think it is.
Well, I'll do up a letter for their board and I'll put it in all your mailboxes, you guys can review it. Just so that I'm appreciative at the same time of what Peters Creek, I just don't know without the debt service, whether we can afford to extend this project with everything that's in our budget.
Mr. Suggs,
And without the debt service.
is it the last Monday or is it it's this month, there's 5 Mondays?
I don't have my calendar.
And I may write in that letter our concerns with
I think it's the fourth.
issues.
I think it's the fourth Monday.
The fact that we're doing
Yeah.
a subdivision
I think
with our
that's-
engineer who's gonna advise our planning commission about setting. But in considering it's all gonna be turned over to them, we're never even gonna own it when we subdivide, it's gonna be their property at the end, so they might as well do the subdivision.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay?
So,
Alright.
okay. Next is the hiring of